The evening air was thick with an unsettling tension as I parked my car in front of Kyle and Linda's house. A flicker of unease sparked within me at the sight of Linda's car parked in its usual spot. Strange how something so mundane could set off fearful alarm bells in my mind. As I stepped out, the familiar warmth of home was overshadowed by a gnawing instinct that whispered something was off. I took a deep breath, trying to shake it off, but the weight of uncertainty settled heavily on my shoulders, making it hard to shake off the feeling that this evening would be unlike any other. As I approached the front door, I could hear snippets of conversation drifting from inside. I hesitated for just a moment before pushing the door open, finding it ajar, a silent invitation, or perhaps an insidious trap. The voices became clearer as I entered the living room. There they were, Kyle and Linda, my son-in-law and my wife, sitting across from one another, their expressions mysterious and conspiratorial. The comfortable hominess of this space suddenly felt alien, a stage for a cruel play unfolding before my very eyes. Once he is in the facility, we can restructure everything. Kyle's voice slithered softly through the air, like a serpent ready to strike. He will be confused, dependent. We can take control of the house, and then it's just a matter of waiting a little longer before we access the investments. The venom in his tone sent a chill racing down my spine. My heart plummeted, and I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. The casual intimacy of their conspiracy felt as foreign as it was forced. I leaned against the doorframe, gripping it tightly, the wood pressing against my palm, grounding me. Even as my heart raced, betrayal dripped from every word, each syllable a dark nail driving deeper into my gut. "You know he has no idea," Linda replied, her tone laced with a sickening sweetness. "He thinks he can trust us. He has no idea we've already started the paperwork to put him in the home." She paused, a wicked laugh escaping her lips that echoed off the walls like a chorus of mockery. "All those years of being the good husband and father. It's time he sees that he's just an old man waiting for us to clean up his mess." The world around me blurred, and for a moment I felt as if I might collapse. How could they conspire to turn my own family against me? I had devoted my life to this family, my sacrifices intangible yet foundational. Memories flooded my mind of nights spent working overtime, foregoing my own dreams to put food on the table and provide for Linda and our daughter. It felt as if all that love and dedication crumbled into dust within mere moments, replaced by the cold realization of how easily it could be dismissed. A quiet fury ignited within me, simmering just beneath the surface. I could feel the blood roar in my ears as the humiliation washed over me. I had stood by them, trusting them with everything I had, yet here they were, plotting my demise without a single trace of guilt. That moment, that sickening realization, marked a turning point I never wanted or expected. I felt alive in a way I hadn't before, but it was fueled by a twist of pain and anger that bubbled just beneath the surface. I stepped back, forcing my breath to steady. I could not confront them, not yet. They needed to think they had the upper hand. Let them believe I was still the passive old man they could control. I needed to keep my head clear, plotting my course carefully, knowing that the real battle would be fought with my intellect, not with raw emotion. The fury that bubbled inside seemed to settle into my stomach, transforming into a resolve more potent than anticipated. As I drove away, my hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white as I navigated the familiar roads lined with flickering streetlights. I could feel the heat of betrayal seeping into my thoughts, shifting from heartache into something more fierce, a resolve ignited by the fires of indignation. I would not let them push me aside. The darkened streets blurred by, my mind racing with possibilities. Each twist and turn in the road mirrored the paths my thoughts were skirting around. They might think they could toy with my life, my future, but their arrogance left them exposed. I felt an hopeful spark lighting my way forward, a sense of clarity born from the chaos around me. I would allow their plans to unfold, letting them reveal the full extent of their betrayal. I knew I had to play the long game. When the time was right, I would rise from the shadows, armed with the knowledge and experience that came from a lifetime of dedication to my family. I was no longer the passive man they could manipulate. As I turned onto the road home, a sense of cold determination settled into my bones. This was no longer about mere survival. It was about reclaiming the life I had built. I would not go gently into that dark night. Their betrayal would fuel my fire. And soon they would understand the repercussions of playing with my trust. I would become the confident architect of my own fate, dismantling the counterfeit trust they had built between us, brick by fragile brick, until all that remained was the truth of my resolve. As I stepped into the dimly lit confines of my home, a sense of emptiness wrapped around me like a thick fog. I dropped my keys onto the table, the familiar clatter echoing in the silence, marking my return to a sanctuary that felt increasingly alien. The walls stood as witnesses to our family's laughter, dreams woven into the very fabric of this house, now a backdrop for betrayal. Each room bore the weight of memories, yet none could shield me from the cold reality that had hijacked the warmth I once felt here. I sank into the worn armchair by the window, a seat that had held countless moments of reflection and joy. Now, it bore witness to my swirling thoughts. I gazed out at the street, the same road that had just betrayed me, where laughter and joy once flowed like a steady stream. The melancholy evening sky morphed from dusky blue to deep indigo, as if the universe conspired with my grief. A melancholy breeze stirred the leaves of a nearby tree, whispering secrets I longed to understand. In this sanctum of solitude, I let my mind wander back to the melancholic foundations of my sacrifices. I remembered the countless overtime hours spent at the engineering firm, laboring to secure our family's future. I had taken on every project that came my way, sacrificing nights and weekends, always aiming to build a strong nest for my loved ones. The pang of regret clutched at my heart as I replayed the memories. The radiant smiles of my daughter during her graduation, Linda's glowing pride as I handed her a rose that day. I could see her face so clearly then, illuminated by the sunlight, her laughter ringing like music, each note a reminder of the love we forged over the years. But now, that same laughter became a haunting echo of what I had lost, of the trust that had been shattered into irreparable pieces. The love I poured into this family seemed worthless now, like sand slipping through my fingers. I reflected on the subsequent sacrifices I made, always opting for the practical over the aspirational. My dreams had turned gray as I cast them aside, thinking I was nurturing a greater good. The engineering principles I once applied with ease became metaphors for my existence. A careful balance of stress and support, of structures built and fortified, both physical and emotional. Yet somehow, I had neglected my foundation. All these years, I had given every ounce of myself to strengthen my family's pillars, only to discover those very pillars were now aiming to topple me. Time lengthened as I sat in darkness, the emotional turmoil devising plans of its own. Flashbacks ignited my anger anew. Glimpses of Kyle's smirking face as he offered help, always so eager to ingratiate himself. It was astonishing how easily one could mask intentions beneath a facade of kindness. I recalled him sitting at our dining table, a part of our family gatherings, sharing stories and laughter. Blind trust had delivered him the keys to our home and our lives. He was the wolf, cloaked in the skin of a sheep, and I had been blind to the threat, lulled by familial affection. The realization struck me like a thunderbolt. This betrayal was not a mere act of greed, but a systematic dismantling of my life's work. Bitterness curled around my heart, hardening it into something more dangerous than I had ever been. They had believed my naivete protected me, but that assumption would prove disastrous. Somewhere deep within, a voice called out, urging me to muster strength from this moment of vulnerability. I looked around the room, seeking clarity. The pictures on the wall seemed to move, telling stories that I could now reframe. The narrative was mine to rewrite. I had once been an engineer, adept at deconstructing problems to understand their components. If I could apply that same analytical mindset to my situation, perhaps I could forge a path forward. Slipping my hand into my pocket, I felt the cool metal of my watch, a gift from my father, a reminder of resilience and endurance. That watch represented time I had devoted to building a life, and now time I would reclaim from those who sought to exploit it. The bitterness coiling within me transformed into adrenaline. I felt the urge to strategize, to lay the groundwork for my comeback. As I sat silently, shadows playing across the walls, I made a decision. I would use this time to pivot my life back into control, channeling my growing rage into plans that had to be calculated, patient, and meticulous. I resolved to gather information, anything I could use against them, every piece of evidence, every financial whisper, until I could see clearly their machinations and plot the dismantling of their insidious scheme. This energetic crucible would forge a weapon out of my pain. Every moment of humiliation I felt sitting in that living room would transform into determination. I needed to be as confident, strategic as I had been in engineering, leveraging my skills to build an advantage. It was time to revisit the blueprints of my life, to analyze every interaction, every financial transaction, every vulnerability they assumed I held. They had made a grave error in underestimating me, and I would ensure they understood the consequences of their actions. With the flicker of resolve igniting in my spirit, I stood up, propelled by newfound clarity. I walked to my desk, pulling out a blank sheet of paper, the crisp surface a canvas where I would begin to draft my strategy,
My return. The night unfurled like an endless expanse before me, and I allowed myself the freedom to hope once more, dream not only of vindication, but of liberation from the shackles imposed by betrayal. In that moment, I promised myself that I would not only reclaim what was mine, but emerge stronger, more resilient, and unyielding. They had offered me a gift in their treachery. They had awakened the architect within me, and I was ready to design the foundations of my resurgence. The weeks that followed became a whirlwind of activity, both mentally and physically exhausting, yet invigorating. During the day, I immersed myself in a calculated frenzy, and at night, I allowed my thoughts to churn, constructing various possible outcomes. With a renewed sense of purpose, I transformed my home office into a war room, a sanctuary dedicated to my tactical resurgence. Files that had once gathered dust were now meticulously organized, each document alive with potential. I immersed myself in financial records, tapping into my engineering background to reconfigure my understanding of the past. Each spreadsheet became a blueprint through which I navigated the complexities of my assets, previous transactions, and the hidden consequences of Kyle and Linda's plans for my life. As I dissected every detail, I amassed not only evidence, but a confident, deeper understanding of their underhanded strategies. One evening, as I sifted through a particularly dense stack of papers, I, surprised, stumbled upon a surprising find: contracts relating to property management changes that Kyle had instigated. My pulse quickened as I scanned the signatures and provisions. Not only did this documentation affirm Kyle's intent to seize control of my assets, but it also revealed a slew of suspicious clauses that could easily be challenged in court. The adrenaline coursed through my veins, emboldening me as I photocopied the pages, ensuring that I had every shred of evidence safely stored. However, mere evidence would not be enough. I realized I needed more than documentation to dismantle their plans. I had to understand their motives and anticipate their actions. To do this, I pursued the idea of building a psychological profile of Kyle and Linda based on their overconfidence and paranoia. I began by orchestrating minor interactions, creating opportunities to observe their behavior in a natural setting. My mind flickered back to old memories as I tried to recall how they might react when they felt threatened or cornered. One crisp morning, I suggested that Kyle and I meet at the corner café, a local coffee spot where we had shared many a laugh over the years. It felt like stepping back in time, a conscious reminder of the bonds we had forged, but now laced with the thorns of distrust. As I arrived, I took a moment to collect myself, practicing the subtle art of feigned nonchalance. When he walked through the door with that same self-assured gait, I almost felt a melancholic nostalgia, but it quickly transformed into conviction. "Harold, great to see you," Kyle boomed, his voice cheerful yet hollow. I returned his greeting, playfully placing a casual smile on my face. As we settled into our seats, I steered the conversation subtly toward family, then directed it toward shared financial beliefs. "I've been thinking about investments lately, Kyle. You know how volatile the market can be," I started, watching as his demeanor shifted. "And I know you've always been quite the strategist when it comes to that realm." His eyes glinted with interest, but I could see the mysterious caution lurking beneath. "Well, it can be tricky, but there are definitely opportunities out there," he replied. His tone was mysterious, yet I could sense the caution in his words. Noticeably, his fidgeting fingers betrayed his calm exterior, an indication of the simmering tension that hovered between us. I pressed further, feigning ignorance. Sometimes it just feels safer to keep the status quo, you know? But sometimes danger lurks in complacency. As I spoke, I sensed that Kyle was acutely aware of the message behind my words. Earth-shattering truths lay beneath our casual exchange, and it thrilled me to know that I had the upper hand. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, analyzing how to dismiss my implications without revealing his own vulnerabilities. After the meeting, I felt invigorated.
Each interaction revealed how skewed our family dynamics had become, a delicate interplay of trust now riddled with suspicion. I had anticipated Kyle's moves, and I was primed to play the next round. The following week, I arranged a meeting with Julie, my attorney, to discuss the next steps. As I recounted the details of my encounters and the evidence I gathered, her expression shifted from concern to determination. We need to ensure these contracts and plans don't take shape. If they believe they can push you out while you're still standing, they're sorely mistaken, she said, her words comforting my resolve. Julie outlined the process of establishing a trust, one that would shield my assets from Kyle's hands should they pursue their intentions. Together, we crafted a plan that delineated my rights,
Establishing safeguards that would act as barriers against their manipulation. The more I learned, the stronger I felt. I was no longer the docile figure they perceived me to be. As I left her office, the air carried a crispness that reflected my newfound clarity. The fog clouding my sense of self began to lift, revealing a bright path forward. I envisioned not just surviving, but thriving, a noonday sun scorching away the vestiges of betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and my routine crystallized. I continued to meet old acquaintances and reconnect with former colleagues, each conversation serving as both cover and preparation for the storm ahead. I confidently positioned myself with tact and discretion, keeping a low profile while ensuring my presence echoed my authority. With every interaction,
I wove my threads of influence subtly throughout my network. Curious minds fascinated by the newfound direction of my life. Each connection I made became a part of the larger tapestry I was constructing, reinforcing my growing influence as I drew back the curtain layer by layer. At night, I allowed my thoughts to wander. This journey had transformed from instinctive pain into something greater, a call to reclaim my identity and worth. Each dark moment I had once endured morphed into resolve, pushing me to channel my anger into meticulous planning and execution. The architect of my future had emerged, focusing with laser-like clarity on the foundation I was preparing to build. As I collected the scattered pieces of my life, I saw the endgame approaching. Soon, Kyle and Linda would find themselves ensnared by their own duplicity, unmasked before friends and family, standing exposed in the light of the truths I was about to reveal. In the shadows, the aggressive, silent storm I'd become would soon rise, and its aftermath would leave no room for their betrayal to thrive. I was ready to reclaim my life. Victory was not just a dream, it felt inevitable. The day of action arrived, laden with anticipation and a sense of purpose that coursed through my veins. I had been building the framework of my plan piece by piece, and now it was time to put it into motion. I awoke that morning feeling an exhilarating mix of excitement and trepidation, like an engineer ready to unveil their latest design. Every moment leading up to this had been painstakingly calculated, and I could feel a fiery resolve igniting within. I began by gathering the last pieces of evidence I had compiled in preparation for this moment.
I laid out the numerous contracts, agreements, and financial documents I had collected from my many late nights of sleuthing. Each file I spread before me represented not just data, but truths hidden beneath layers of deceit. It was time to gather allies, people who could validate my claims and bolster my assertions. First on my list was my trusted attorney, Julie. I had arranged for her to accompany me as I confronted Kyle and Linda. She would provide the legal backing necessary, and having her by my side would underscore my seriousness. With my heart steadying, I dialed her number, and we confirmed our meeting for the afternoon. As the hours counted down, I rehearsed the details of my confrontation in my mind. I would present the evidence, but do so in a way that would leave no room for escape, no chance for them to wriggle their way out. Each piece I displayed would be a critical component of the argument I intended to present. I wanted them to see the consequences of their actions laid out clearly before them, stripped of any illusions. Finally, around noon, I drove to my house one last time, feeling the weight of the past lifting as I approached the familiar structure. Each step up the pathway felt monumental, as if I was climbing the steps of destiny itself. I could scarcely fathom that I had arrived at this point, a turning tide, a reclamation of my life. As I entered my home, I could already sense the impending storm brewing. Kyle and Linda arrived shortly after, faces painted with curiosity. Their attempts to mask any hint of anxiety comical in their familiarity. Linda greeted me with an overly bright smile that failed to reach her eyes, while Kyle's confident demeanor felt brittle. "Harold, what's with the serious face?" he asked, feigning innocence as he stepped inside. "Let's sit down. There's something important we need to discuss," I replied, my confident voice steady and firm. I motioned for them to take seats around the dining room table where I had laid out copies of the documentation I had assembled. As they settled, I felt the serious moment of truth descending upon us like a thick curtain. "Before we proceed, I want to make it clear that I know what you have been planning," I began, locking eyes with Kyle first. Witnessing the flicker of alarm in his gaze filled me with a sense of satisfaction. "What are you talking about, Harold?" Linda replied, her voice tinged with feigned confusion. "Don't play innocent with me," I continued, the fire of conviction igniting my words. "I've gathered substantial information about your attempts to manipulate my finances. There are contracts that suggest you both intend to leave me without my assets and force me into an assisted living facility, all to take control of what is mine." Their expression shifted instantly, uncertainty leaching the color from their faces. I laid down the first stack of papers, marked with the unmistakable signatures of both Kyle and Linda. As I presented evidence after evidence, I could see their nervous confidence evaporating, replaced by the shadows of panic. Julie, sitting next to me, offered an occasional nod, providing her silent validation as I laid bare the web of deception they had spun. "These documents showcase not only your intentions, but your illegal maneuvers to seize control of my estate. I don't intend to let you do this. I have already consulted with legal counsel, and I will fight for my rights." Kyle's expression, surprised, twisted in disbelief. "You're overreacting, Harold. We were only trying to help you." "Help?" I interjected, cutting him off sharply. "Your idea of help is sinister at best. You and Linda have betrayed the trust I placed in you. I worked tirelessly for this family, sacrificing my dreams to build a secure future, and you've conspired behind my back." With each word, I could feel the situation shifting. The two of them shared a glance, their mask of confidence slipping further. Years of loyalty hung in the balance, and now the tension crackled in the air like a storm about to break. "Harold, please," Linda pleaded, her voice dropping a tone. "You're misunderstanding everything. Why don't we talk this out like adults?" "No, Linda, we've already crossed that line," I replied as I gestured to the final stack of documents. "I'm putting an end to this, and I need you both to understand the ramifications of your actions. I will not stand for this betrayal, and I will not let you undermine my life any longer." I dropped the final bombshell, revealing contacts I had within the financial institution who could validate my claims. They had unwittingly left a trail behind them, the very threads of greed that would unravel the life they sought to commandeer. As uncertainty dawned on their faces, I felt the power shifting, and I pressed harder. This isn't just a corporate issue. This is personal. Think about how this would affect you, not only legally, but personally. You will tarnish your reputations, and this could impact your relationships with others as well. Silence enveloped us, the weight of my words sinking in. My heart thrummed in triumph as I sensed them grappling with the repercussions of their actions. I made my closing argument, confident that they understood the implications of their betrayal, the lines they had drawn that resulted in inevitable ruin. "We can decide how this plays out," I said. "You can choose to come clean, retract your steps, and leave this behind. Or we can go down a path that leads to destruction, both for you and for me." The moments stretched into eternity before Kyle finally broke the silence. "Harold, let's not do this. We can work something out. Just give us a chance to explain." I shook my head. "You've used up all your chances. The choice is yours to make. Make it wisely." With that, I turned to Julie, who offered a firm nod, validation that we had merely begun to scratch the surface of their deceit. I knew that regardless of their immediate response, I was on a path I would no longer stray from. In the days to come, I would ensure that my newfound strength would fortify my foundation, revealing the unimaginable depths they stooped to in their greed. The aggressive I had become would not merely pass, nor would it let them hide in the shadows of betrayal any longer. This was not just my fight. It was about reclaiming the dignity and life I had worked to build. The course was set, the battle lines drawn, and I was ready, more resolute than ever to lay bare the truth. In the aftermath of that crucial confrontation, a quiet but potent shift settled over our household. While they grappled with the gravity of exposure, I moved swiftly and deliberately, slipping into the next phase of my plan. Now was the time to take decisive action, steps that would solidify the guardrails protecting my life and assets from further intrusions. I was no longer a man caught off guard or paralyzed by fear. I was a strategist poised for execution. My first move was securing my financial holdings more rigorously. I contacted my trusted financial advisor, an elderly gentleman named Robert, who had served as my confidant and guide for many years. I explained the situation succinctly.
"Robert, I need to shift my portfolio immediately. Some recent developments have made it clear that I cannot afford complacency anymore." Robert's voice carried the confident steadiness of a lifelong professional. "Harold, I'm glad you told me. We'll move swiftly. Liquidity, asset reallocation, everything necessary to shield your accounts. We'll make sure your investments are safe from any unauthorized access." Over the next several days, I was black and white, a man on a mission. Every dollar, every bond was scrutinized and managed. Accounts that Kyle and Linda once accessed freely were now bolted down, protected by multiple layers of security. I transferred substantial funds into independent trusts and accounts accessible only to me and my attorney. This process was methodical, slow, and deliberate, akin to rerouting power through complex circuitry, isolating the source from sabotage. While the protective financial web spun tighter, I kept a close eye on my adversaries. Their panic was palpable. They stumbled through hurried phone calls, whispered conversations that I happened upon by sheer chance, their calm facades cracking under pressure. I observed the subtle changes in their behavior, the way Linda's eyes darted anxiously, how Kyle avoided my gaze during family gatherings, his usual bravado compromised. Knowing they felt cornered but were desperate to regain control, I orchestrated a series of subtle moves to maintain the psychological upper hand. Sometimes I would gently drop mentions of upcoming meetings with my lawyer or subtle hints about further investigations into financial irregularities. The goal was clear: unsettle them, chip away at their confidence, and keep them off balance. Throughout this period, I maintained my composure in public settings, projecting calm and control, even when my mind churned with calculations and anticipation. During dinners and family events, I wore my mask of outward serenity, listening intensively but speaking sparingly. Beneath that veneer was a man who had taken command of his destiny. One evening, as we gathered for a seemingly innocuous family dinner, I noticed how Kyle skirted around me, avoiding direct conversation. Linda kept fiddling with her napkin, her earlier assertiveness replaced by nervous tension. Suddenly, Linda's voice cut through the room, a sharp edge to her words. "Harold, why don't you calm down? You're making a scene." I fixed her with a steady gaze, the fire behind my eyes unmistakable. I'm calm because I know exactly what's happening and what needs to be done. Their silence spoke volumes. I sensed they were realizing this was not the same man they had plotted against. I was no longer vulnerable. I had become calculated and resolute. Behind closed doors, my nocturnal hours were devoted to strategic planning. Every move they made was anticipated and counteracted. Using engineering principles, I broke down their schemes into components, analyzing where weaknesses lay, then reinforcing my defenses. I held consultations with Julie and Robert regularly, revising our strategy to incorporate new developments. Each day solidified a map of the battlefield I navigated, complex, dynamic, but navigable. I implemented contingencies for unforeseen actions, ensuring that any attempt at interference would be met with immediate consequences. I recalled the integrity and foresight that guided my professional career and applied that rigor to safeguard my personal life. The silent power of preparation was my ally, lending strength to each step forward. Not everything proceeded smoothly. There were moments of frustration, unexpected obstacles that reminded me this was no simple war. But each challenge was a lesson, making me more adaptable and ready to respond with precision. I kept my emotions in check, recalling how fragile systems can fail when stress is unmanaged. I maintained my focus, knowing this was a marathon, not a sprint. When Kyle and Linda eventually confronted me, desperation etched into their voices. I maintained my calm. They accused me of paranoia, questioned my motives, even tried to manipulate family members against me. But my
Legal preparedness and the growing support of friends and colleagues offered a shield stronger than raw emotion. In one particularly tense exchange, Kyle hissed, "You think you can undo this? You're old and out of touch, Harold. You don't know what you're dealing with." I met his challenge with quiet strength. I know exactly what I'm dealing with, and I'm no longer the man you thought you could manipulate. Your arrogance blinded you. I am in control now. As the weeks passed, their desperation grew, but my plan unfurled seamlessly. They were no longer the puppeteers, but the marionettes, caught in threads they couldn't escape. Their attempts to regain control only served to tighten the net around them. I felt a happy satisfaction as the pieces fell into place. The assets secured, the legal barriers erected, the trust of allies consolidated. My life, which they sought to commandeer, was now firmly in my hands. I had transformed from victim to strategist, from betrayed husband to mastermind of his own destiny. This phase of the plan was hard-fought, requiring patience, intellect, and unwavering willpower. But it was necessary, a fortress built to stand against any storm. The battle was not yet won, but the foundations were solid, and I was ready for whatever came next. The silent storm that had risen within me was no fleeting gust, but an unyielding gale, prepared to reclaim what was mine with calculated precision. The day of the family gathering arrived, heavy with a tension that was almost palpable. It felt like walking into a powder keg. Every smile was strained, every word careful, as if beneath the surface.
The air itself was charged with unspoken truths. I had prepared meticulously for this moment, knowing the stakes far exceeded any private struggle. They were about to unfold in the public eye, beneath the watchful gaze of family and friends. As I entered the room, the usual warmth of familiar faces was replaced by a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled apprehension. Eyes flicked toward me, then hastily away. Even my daughter, caught between loyalty and confusion, avoided meeting my gaze directly. But I was confident, no longer the passive man they had once underestimated. I carried evidence, insight, and a resolve that burned quietly beneath my measured exterior. I waited patiently for the moment to reveal itself, the tension coiling tighter with every passing minute. Then, when conversation lulled, I calmly began to speak. My voice clear and steady, slicing through the thick atmosphere. I want to share something that has been weighing heavily on me, I started, letting my eyes meet those of those gathered. There has been a betrayal in our midst, a quiet deception that has jeopardized not only my future, but also the trust that binds this family. A hush fell over the room. Murmurs died, and all attention centered on me. I laid out the narrative carefully, presenting the facts like one would assemble building blocks. I introduced the evidence, contracts, financial records, legal opinions. Each piece was immaculately organized, each revelation delivered with unyielding precision. Kyle shifted uneasily in his seat. Linda's composure wavered. Their faces revealed the cracks I had anticipated. I could see the disbelief tangled with fear, the frantic effort to maintain their facade dissolving under the weight of truth. With Julie's support, I detailed their calculated attempts to wrest control of my assets and isolate me from my home, exposing their angry greed and manipulation. The room grew colder as the story unfolded. Whispers began to ripple like waves among the guests. I spoke not only of wrongdoing, but of the personal betrayal, years of loyalty shattered by lies.
I told stories of sacrifices made silently, nights spent working to build this life, now threatened by those I once called family. My confident voice didn't waver. It carried the gravity of one who had borne the pain and now stood tall in its aftermath. This was no theatrical exhibition. It was a call for justice and reclamation. I wanted my family to see the truth in my eyes, to understand the breadth of the pain I had endured, and to witness the confident strength I had forged in response. As the evidence settled, Kyle and Linda's attempts to interrupt were met with firm refusals and impartial facts. Their denials grew weaker with each counterpoint. The room, once a battleground of whispered tensions, transformed into a space where the veil of deceit finally lifted. When I finished, silence cloaked the room. Then, one by one, relatives, friends, and even neighbors began to voice their surprise, and sympathy. The tide had turned. The isolation Kyle and Linda had banked on shattered like glass under scrutiny. I could see my daughter's eyes well with tears, not just at the revelation, but at the hopeful depth of love and resilience that had fortified me. The family's collective gaze shifted from confusion to solidarity.
I wasn't alone anymore. In that moment, I felt the burden begin to ease. Not completely gone, but shared and understood. The facade of betrayal had crumbled, replaced by an undeniable truth. I had brought the shadows into the light. The storm had broken, not in chaos, but in clarity, and I stood at the center, not broken, but unyielding.